Please don't hit me again. I've had enough. Maya Williams didn't mean to spill the coffee. It was a simple hand tremor, just a slip. A tiny falter from exhaustion and the mug tilted. The hot liquid splashed across the table, drops hitting the sleeve of Mr. Carver's flannel shirt. For a second, silence hung in the air like a held breath. Then his palm struck her cheek so hard the sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot. Her head snapped to the side, lips splitting against her teeth. Warm blood filled her mouth, metallic and humiliating. Carver rose from the booth slowly, as if savoring the moment, eyes narrowing at her like she was vermin on his boots. "That's what you get," he growled. "Stupid girl. Can't even serve coffee right." Maya staggered back, one hand on her cheek, the other instinctively raised in defense. Her voice trembled, desperate and broken. "Please, sir, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me again." Carver leaned toward her, breath heavy with whiskey. "People like you ought to learn your place." Her knees weakened. She pressed against the counter, trying to hide the shaking in her legs. Behind the grill, Miller dropped his spatula with a clang. His jaw clenched, but not with concern for anger at her. A flush of irritation crept up his neck. "What the hell is wrong with you, Maya?" He barked loud enough to shake salt shakers. "You just lost me a paying customer. Can't you do one damn thing right?" Maya's voice trembled. I didn't mean to. It slipped." "Slipped?" Miller thundered. "You slip every other day. If you weren't always so slow, so scatterbrained, maybe you'd still have a future. Instead, you're here making a damn mess of mine." "Miller, please," she whispered, clutching her apron as if it could shield her. "I need this job. I need the hours. My little girl." Miller waved her off like she was dirt. "I don't give a damn about your sob story, Maya. You're hanging by a thread here, and you just cut it yourself." The words hit harder than Carver's slap. Her chest felt crushed, breath shallow, a storm of panic rising. "Miller, please, I'll pay for the coffee. I'll clean everything, I swear. Don't fire me, not over this." She fell into a pleading rhythm, voice cracking under the weight of desperation, dignity dissolving on the dirty tile floor. "I'm trying, I swear I am. My daughter, she's only 4. I can't lose this job, please, sir, please." Someone in the booth by the window coughed awkwardly. The old couple at table 4 stared down into their mashed potatoes. No one stood up. No one said a word. Except him. From the farthest booth in the corner, a man rose slowly. He looked unremarkable, worn jeans, a plain gray shirt, the kind of man who could slip unnoticed into a crowd. But as he stepped into the silence, there was something in the way he carried himself steady, deliberate, that turned heads. Charles Remington hadn't spoken a word all evening. He'd come in quietly, ordered his usual black coffee and fried catfish, tipped 20 on a $12 bill, and disappeared into his corner, as he had for the last few weeks. No one suspected who he was. No one knew he'd once sat across boardroom tables worth billions, that he was the reason dozens of small towns were slowly rebuilding across the state. But tonight, Charles Remington had heard enough. Charles Remington moved with a calm that cut through the room's tension. Not hurried, not dramatic, just certain, as if he'd made his decision long before he rose. "That's enough," he said, voice low but firm like gravel softened by grief. Miller turned on him. "Mind your own business. This is my diner." Charles met his stare. "I know, and right now, your diner is a place where a woman bleeds and begs and no one lifts a hand to help her." Miller scoffed. "You don't know this girl. She's trouble, always whining about her life, always a problem." He turned to Maya, whose eyes were wide, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "You don't deserve this," he said. "None of it, and you never have." Maya shook her head, the pressure in her throat threatening to break free. "Please, don't make it worse." "No." Charles glanced at Maya, her trembling hands, her split lip, the shame shaking through her every bone. Then back at Miller. "She's a human being," he said. "That's all anyone needs to know." Carver puffed up, emboldened by Miller's support. "Who do you think you are, buddy? Some savior? This is just a waitress. She ought to learn to keep quiet and do her job." Charles's eyes darkened, not with anger, but disappointment so heavy it quieted the room more than shouting ever could. "I think," he replied slowly, "that a man's worth isn't measured by who he can hurt. but who he chooses to stand up for. Carver stepped forward, fists clenched. You want to get hit too? Charles didn't blink. I've been hit before. I survived it. But I won't stand here and watch this continue. He took $100 bill from his wallet and set it beside Maya's spilled coffee mug. For the meal, he said softly. Then he slid his gaze to Miller, and for the cost of looking the other way. The bill sat there green, crisp, accusing. Miller's face twisted not in guilt, but rage at being challenged in his own territory. You can walk right out that door, mister, and don't come back. I will leave, Charles answered. But this isn't over. He looked at Maya one last time. His voice softened, almost a whisper. You don't deserve this, and one day, you won't have to beg anyone to see your worth. No. Then he walked out, the bell above the door chiming like a small, stubborn hope. Maya watched through tears as he crossed the lot, climbed into an old pickup truck, and sat with his head-bowed hands gripping the steering wheel as if steadying himself against a memory too heavy to hold standing. Inside the diner, life resumed, forks lifted, heads lowered, breathing resumed, but nothing felt normal. Not to Maya. Not anymore. She pressed her palm to her bloody lip, trembling. She didn't know the man's name. She didn't know why he cared. But she knew one thing. Someone had seen her not as a burden, not as a nuisance, but as a person worth defending. In a life full of silence, that mattered. If this story moved you, give it a like and drop your city in the comments below. You never know who else nearby is watching with you. And outside, Charles whispered to himself, voice rough with old grief. Ruth, I found hair. He opened the glove box and touched the embroidered handkerchief again. R.W. Ruth Williams, Maya's mother, the woman who once ran into fire to save him, tonight lit a different fire. And he wasn't going to let it die. Not this time. The next morning, the coffee stain was still there. A brown splotch soaked into the floor tiles behind booth 3. Faint but stubborn. Maya saw it as soon as she clocked in. Her lip was swollen, the cut barely closed, covered lightly with concealer that couldn't quite mask the bruising beneath. She didn't want to come back. Every step through the diner door was like walking into a room where the walls whispered your humiliation. But rent didn't wait for bruises to fade, and her daughter's shoes had a hole in the sole. She tied her apron in silence, not meeting anyone's gaze. A few regulars muttered polite hellos, unsure whether to act like nothing happened or say something and risk being pulled into the mess. So they did what most people do when faced with discomfort. They stayed quiet. Miller didn't speak to her. He just handed her a rag and pointed toward booth 3. She crouched down to scrub the stain, ignoring the ache in her cheek, the sting of coffee against healing skin. The tile was cold beneath her knees. The rag soaked quickly, brown bleeding into white. She scrubbed harder. Still here, huh? A voice said, thick with contempt. Maya looked up to see Carver sitting at his usual table, arms crossed, eyes scanning her like he was inspecting a cracked dish. She quickly dropped her gaze and returned to scrubbing. Guess Miller wasn't serious after all, he continued. Man talks tough, but business is business. You should be grateful. Some places wouldn't tolerate mouthy help. Maya didn't reply. She couldn't afford another confrontation. Not now. Not with everything still so raw. She stood, wiping her hands on the apron, and walked to the coffee pot like muscle memory had taken over. Her fingers closed around the handle just as the bell above the door jingled. She turned and froze. It was him, the man from the night before. The one who stood up, who looked at her like she was someone, not something. He wore the same faded jeans and simple gray button-down. But there was something different today. Not in his clothes, but in the way people looked at him. Whispers rippled softly through the room like wind brushing wheat. Maya stood still, coffee pot forgotten in her hand. Charles Remington gave a brief nod to the hostess and moved toward his corner booth, the same seat as before. He didn't scan the menu. He didn't glance around nervously. He simply sat and waited. Maya hesitated, then approached. Her heart beat faster with every step. Her hand trembled again. This time not from fear, but from the weight of questions she hadn't dared to ask. Black coffee? She said, voice quiet. Charles looked up at her with the same calm from the night before. Yes, Please. And if the catfish is fresh, I'll take that again. She nodded, not yet ready to speak more. As she poured his coffee, he studied her face, not in pity, but in recognition. He noticed the lip, the wince when she turned, but he didn't ask about it, not yet. When she brought his plate, he reached into his wallet and set down a business card beside the napkin. Please don't panic, he said gently. I'm not here to cause trouble for you, but you should know who I am. Maya looked at the card. Her eyes scanned the gold lettering. Charles Remington, President and CEO, Remington Ventures. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the tray. The name was familiar vaguely. She'd seen it once on the local news. Something about rebuilding community centers, renovating old businesses. But it didn't connect. Not until now. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't come here as a CEO, he said. I came to eat. To observe. That's something I do when I'm considering buying a property. I visit anonymously. I watch. I listen. You're here to buy Miller's? He nodded. I was, still am, but not for the reasons you think. I'm not looking to flip it or franchise it. I look for places where change can happen. Places that matter. She blinked, heart pounding. Why would this place matter to someone like you? He took a long breath, as if reaching into a memory he hadn't touched in years. Because of your mother. That stopped her cold. Her lips parted, but no words came. 24 years ago, he continued, there was a fire at a research facility outside Savannah. I was a junior partner at a development firm, young and foolish. I stayed behind to grab a file. The fire spread faster than we expected. I was trapped. Smoke filled the hallway. I couldn't see. His voice faltered for the first time. Then someone grabbed me, pulled me through the fire. I didn't know her name until later. Ruth Williams. She went back in for others and didn't come out. Maya's breath caught. Her mother. The story she'd heard in fragments her whole life. How Ruth had died saving people, but the details had always been vague. Now, here was a man who had lived because of her sacrifice. She was my mother, Maya said, barely above a whisper. I know, Charles said softly. I saw her photo in your wallet when you paid last week. I wasn't sure until last night, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. Maya sank into the booth opposite him, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say, she said. You don't have to say anything, he replied. But I need to say this. I didn't come back to be a savior. I came back because I owe her. And maybe, in some small way, I can make that debt mean something. Silence stretched between them, thick with memory and the weight of unspoken grief. Finally, Maya spoke. Miller won't let me stay here long. Not after last night. He hates me now more than ever. Charles looked toward the counter where Miller was pretending not to watch. Then maybe he shouldn't be in charge of this place anymore. Her eyes widened. You'd really buy it? I'd rebuild it, he said. But I won't do it without someone who understands what this community really needs. Maya stared at him, the thought too big to fit into her reality. The idea that someone like her could be part of building something, owning something, felt impossible. I'm not like you, she whispered. Charles smiled gently. Neither was your mother, but she ran into a fire anyway. He stood, leaving the card and a $50 tip on the table. I'll be in town for a few more days. If you want to talk, call me. Then he left, as quietly as he'd entered. Maya sat there, card in hand, heart pounding. Outside, the stain on the tile was already starting to fade. Charles Remington drove slowly, his fingers tapping against the worn leather of the steering wheel. The sun dipping behind the pine trees that lined the narrow Georgia road. His truck creaked over every bump, old suspension complaining under the weight of silence. He could have driven something newer, sleeker, but he preferred this rust-colored Ford. It reminded him of where he started. Not the boardrooms, not the hotel lounges with white tablecloths, but the back roads of rural Georgia, where a man's word still meant something, and the scars of poverty ran deeper than cracked sidewalks. His mind wandered, inevitably, to the fire. It had been late fall, cool night, dry air, perfect conditions for something to go wrong, and it had. A forgotten space heater, an overloaded breaker, something small that spiraled into something devastating. He remembered the smoke before the flames. how it filled the building like a phantom, choking out the light. He had dropped to the floor, like they tell you in drills, crawling blind down a hallway he thought he knew. But panic muddles directions. The air had grown hotter by the second. His lungs burned. Then hands, two strong, gloved hands had pulled him by the shoulders, dragging him toward the exit. He never saw her face in the moment. Just her voice. Steady, calm, assuring. I've got you. Keep breathing. Then she was gone. Later, in the hospital, someone handed him a photo clipped to a report. Ruth Williams, age 40. 1. Nurse. Mother. Volunteer. Deceased. He remembered the shame, how he never thanked her, how he lived and she didn't. He'd tried to track down her family, but the trail ran cold. He told himself it was enough to live better, to help others, but it never felt settled, not until now. Pulling into the gravel lot of the only motel in town, Charles parked under a flickering sign that read, Midway Inn, Weekly Specials. It was modest, clean enough, the kind of place truckers and traveling salesmen rotated through like coins in a vending machine. He grabbed the bag from the passenger seat and headed inside, the doorbell jingling with tired cheer. At the front desk, a teenage clerk looked up from his phone. Back again, sir? He asked. Charles nodded. Room 5 still available? Yes, sir. As he signed the ledger, he asked. The local diner. Miller's. How long's it been open? Oh, that place? Forever. My grandma says she went there on prom night in the 70s. It's kind of a town staple, though the food's gone downhill. The kid leaned in. Owner's a jerk, though. Runs off good people. Charles gave a non-committal grunt and took his key. Later that night, he sat on the edge of the motel bed, a foam coffee cup steaming beside him, laptop open. Documents filled the screen, business records, zoning maps, Miller's tax history. He wasn't bluffing. He was already 3/4 through the process of acquiring the property. All it needed now was a signature. But this wasn't just a transaction anymore. He clicked over to a folder labeled Community Concepts. It was filled with blueprints, renovation models, plans to revitalize struggling businesses into local anchors, job training hubs, shared kitchens, open mic stages, safe spaces for after-school programs. But they all lacked something Maya had in spades. Soul. Real lived-in soul. The kind you can't replicate with reclaimed wood or Edison bulbs. He tapped the table thoughtfully. This was more than Ruth's legacy now. It was Maya's shot, and he wasn't going to hand it to her like charity. He would offer it like a mirror. Show her the strength she already had. Just like her mother did for him. Back at her apartment, Maya tucked her daughter into bed, brushing curls away from her forehead as the child murmured, "Love you, Mama." "Love you more," Maya whispered, her voice raw from the day. She stood for a long time in the hallway, watching her breathe. Her fingers still clutched the business card Charles had given her, edges bent from overhandling. She'd read it a dozen times. It didn't feel real. She moved to the tiny kitchenette and poured herself a glass of water, wincing at the dull ache in her jaw. The bruises would bloom by morning purple reminders of a man's cruelty and another's silence. But the card, that meant something else. Possibility. Change. Terrifying, unreachable change. She pulled a shoebox from the cabinet above the fridge. Inside were the fragments of her mother's life, a hospital badge, a watch that no longer ticked, a faded photograph of Ruth holding baby Maya, joy lighting her face. And at the bottom, the newspaper clipping, "Local nurse dies saving others in Savannah fire." No mention of names, no survivors listed, just a 2-paragraph write-up beside a car dealership ad. "I didn't even know who you saved," Maya said softly. Until now, tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. "What do I do, Mama?" she whispered. "What if I'm not ready for something like this?" She closed the box, holding it to her chest. Outside, the town was quiet, but something had shifted, like the air before a storm, or after one. The next morning, Maya dressed slowly, choosing her neatest uniform blouse, the one without stains on the sleeve. Her daughter sipped juice at the table, swinging her legs. Are you going back to the diner today? The girl asked. Maya paused. Maybe not. Is that good? Maya gave a soft smile. It might be. She walked her daughter to daycare, then stood outside for a full minute before pulling out the card again. She dialed the number with fingers that shook slightly. Remington Ventures. A crisp voice answered. Mr. Remington, please, Maya said. One moment. Click. Silence. Then his voice, low and calm, like yesterday's thunder softened into rain. Maya. I want to talk, she said. I'll be at the diner in an hour. Same booth. May. And just like that, her world took its first step toward change. The morning sun stretched across Miller's diner in soft gold, catching the chrome edges of napkin dispensers and making the dust particles dance. The bell above the door jingled as Maya walked in, not in her uniform, but in a simple blue blouse and clean jeans. For the first time in months, she wasn't here to serve coffee. She wasn't here to scrub stains or swallow insults. She was here because she chose to be. Her heart raced anyway. Miller noticed her first. His face twisted, not in concern but suspicion. You're not on the schedule today. I know, Maya kept her voice steady. She spotted Charles in the same booth as before, a steaming mug in front of him. I'm here to meet someone. Miller followed her gaze, and his expression soured. That guy again? Listen, whatever ideas he's put in your head, let me tell you something. This place is real life. Folks like us don't get saved by rich men in shiny trucks. He drove a beat-up Ford, she murmured. What? Nothing, sir. Miller smirked like he'd won something. Thought so. Maya walked away from him slowly, resisting the urge to rub her still tender cheek. She approached the booth and stood for a second before Charles looked up. His expression warm but not pitying. Just present. Grounded. Seeing her. You came, he said simply. Maya nodded and slid into the seat across from him. To her surprise, her hands weren't shaking this time. You said you'd explain. I did. Charles leaned back. But only if you asked. You did. She took a breath. What exactly do you want from me? Before answering, he glanced toward Miller, who was pretending to wipe the counter while clearly eavesdropping. Charles lowered his voice. I want to buy this diner, and I want you to help me build something from it. Something real. Something this town needs. Maya blinked. I'm a waitress. You're a mother, a survivor, someone who keeps showing up even when life doesn't give you a reason to. He paused. Your mother was the same. Her throat tightened. I can't be her. I'm not asking you to be. His gaze softened. I'm asking you to see what she saw in herself, what I see in you. Maya looked down, fingers tracing the edge of the table. A war raged inside her, a lifetime of being told she wasn't enough versus the echo of her mother's courage. Somewhere between those two truths, she felt something shift, something small but real. Why here? She asked. You could buy anywhere. Because change doesn't start in big places, he said quietly. It starts in forgotten corners, in small rooms where someone dares to believe in better. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard. I don't know anything about running a business. You know how people should be treated. That's the foundation of every good place. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But fear sat heavy in her chest. Everybody in this town knows I need this job, she whispered. They know I struggle. They've already judged me. Charles shook his head. People don't judge you because of who you are. They judge you because of what they fear losing. If someone like you rises. He paused. And fear is loud. Courage is quieter, but it lasts longer. Maya let those words settle. Then she leaned in, voice low. Miller will never let you buy this place. Macy. Charles's lips twitched like a secret smile. He already did. Signed the papers yesterday. Maya's breath stopped. He what? He thought he was selling to a group from Atlanta. Charles lifted his mug. Turns out it was me. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Miller had no idea, but he would soon. So what happens now? She whispered. Now, Charles said, we build. But first, we do this properly. He slid a folded envelope across the table. Severance pay for you, 6 weeks' worth. Even though he wouldn't have given it. Maya stared at it like it might vanish. I didn't ask for this. I know. His voice was soft. That's why it means something. She swallowed hard. Her fingers brushed the envelope but didn't take it yet. What if I say no? Then you walk away with that check and a reference from me. He met her eyes. But I don't think you'll say no. I think you're scared because you know what a yes would mean. D. What's that? That you're capable of more than anyone ever let you believe. Her breath trembled. Before she could answer, Miller stormed over, clattering plates onto the next table with unnecessary force. You two done playing pretend? He snapped. Some of us got work to do. Charles stood slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff his chest. He simply looked at Miller the way someone looks at a bully who's already lost. Yes, he said, we are. Maya rose beside him, legs unsteady but heart strangely sure. Miller scoffed. Good. Now get out. Both of you. Charles nodded, as if expecting it. We will. After one last thing. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket and set it on the counter. Miller grabbed it, scanning the front page. His face went from confusion to disbelief to rage. What is this? Proof, Charles said evenly, that you no longer own this diner. The room fell still. You sold it, Charles continued. Yesterday. You didn't ask who the buyer was. Miller's jaw dropped. You lying? No, Charles interrupted. I keep my word. Something you should try sometime. The older man sputtered, voice shaking. You have no right. I have every right, Charles said. And soon, so will she. He nodded toward Maya. Everything in her stilled. Time folded. Memory and hope collided. Maya wasn't ready, but she was willing. And sometimes, that's all a future needs to begin. Charles stepped toward the door, holding it open. You coming? He asked. Maya took a breath shallow, shaking, terrified. Then she walked forward, not away from something, toward it. The sun had begun its slow descent when Maya stepped out of Miller's diner. Her face flushed from adrenaline, the envelope still clutched in her hand. Behind her, Miller's shouts echoed faintly, but they no longer pierced her the way they used to. Something had shifted. A door had opened, and for the first time, she hadn't been shoved through it or locked out. She had chosen to walk out. Charles waited near his truck, leaning against the driver's side door like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't smiling, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes, like a man who had finally moved one stone on a mountain he'd carried for years. Maya approached slowly, unsure what to say now that the moment had arrived. Her legs still trembled. Her lips still throbbed beneath the makeup, but her back no longer felt bent. He opened the passenger door. Ride with me? She hesitated, then nodded. Inside the cab, the upholstery was worn but clean. A child's drawing, faded and tucked under the dashboard plastic, caught her eye. It was crude, a sun and tree, and two stick figures holding hands. Charles noticed. My daughter drew that when she was 6. She's 23 now. You have a daughter? Maya asked softly. I do, and I want her to grow up in a world where women like you don't have to beg for dignity. Maya said nothing, but she felt her throat tighten. The engine hummed to life and they pulled onto the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. He didn't speak for a few minutes, giving her time to breathe. The Georgia pines passed by in quiet rhythm. It wasn't until they reached the town's edge that he slowed the truck and turned onto a side road, dirt kicking up behind them. Where are we going? She asked. Not afraid, just curious. Somewhere I go when I need to think. They drove another 5 minutes before he parked beside a small, unmarked building, wooden, a bit weather-worn, with a garden overgrown at the edges. Maya followed him to the back porch, where a set of old rocking chairs faced a field of wildflowers. This used to be my grandmother's house, he said, settling into one of the chairs. I fixed it up a few years ago. No one lives here now, but it reminds me where I come from. Maya sat beside him, uncertain. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was settling, like dust after a storm. Charles reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded square of fabric, faded white with embroidered corners, the initials RW stitched carefully in the corner. Maya gasped before she could stop herself. That's, I know, he said gently. It's your mother's. She tucked it into my hand the night she saved me. I didn't even realize until I woke up in the hospital. I kept it all these years. He placed it carefully on her lap. Maya stared down at the handkerchief like it was a ghost, like it might disappear if she blinked too hard. Her fingers touched the threads, and for a second, she saw her mother's face, sweat on her brow, kindness in her eyes. and that fierce, tireless strength that had once made Maya believe anything was possible. She carried this everywhere, Maya whispered. Said it was her shield. She didn't need a gun or pepper spray. Just this. And her voice. Charles nodded. Her voice saved me. Maya closed her eyes. I always wondered if it mattered. Her dying that way. If anyone even remembered. I remember, Charles said, every single day. Silence stretched. Then Maya asked, barely audible, why me? Charles looked out across the field, eyes narrowed against the light. Because your mother didn't save me to let me forget. And you remind me of her. The way you move through pain like it's just part of the job. The way you still offer kindness, even when you don't get any in return. You don't need saving, Maya. You need room to lead. She shook her head. You don't know what I've done to survive. The things I've accepted. How many times I've let people walk over me because I was too tired to fight. And yet, he said, here you are, sitting beside a man you could have run from. Listening, thinking. That's not weakness. That's resilience. She blinked at him, tears rising again, but this time, not from pain. I don't want charity. You're not getting any, Charles replied. You're getting a stake. A voice. You'll help design the new place. Help hire. Help shape what it becomes. Because no one knows how to make people feel seen like someone who's gone invisible themselves. Maya looked down at her hands, still stained faintly from coffee, blood, and now possibility. The envelope still sat in her purse, unopened. But in this moment, it didn't feel like the only thing that could save her. And what if I fail? She asked. Then you try again, Charles said simply. And I'll be there. The sun had begun to dip lower now, brushing the field with amber. A breeze tugged at the edge of the handkerchief in her lap. She reached up and wiped her cheek with it. I want to try, she said, voice trembling but firm. Charles smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just honest. That's all I needed to hear. They sat for a while longer, two strangers tethered by history, memory, and the shared understanding that healing doesn't always begin with shouting. It begins with one person being willing to stand still in another's pain. As they drove back into town, Maya stared out the window, the handkerchief still in her lap. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't bracing for disaster. She was looking for doors, and one of them had just opened. The next morning, Maya stood in front of her hallway mirror, dressed in the same blouse she'd worn yesterday, but everything about her felt different. Her shoulders weren't hunched the way they used to be when preparing for a shift at the diner. Her hands, once clenched in silent resistance, now rested calmly by her sides. But her eyes were tired, not the weariness of long hours or unpaid bills. This was something deeper, a tug of war between fear and something new. Hope. Behind her, her daughter played with a doll at the kitchen table, humming a tune Maya didn't recognize. The morning sun warmed the tiny apartment, casting streaks of light across the linoleum floor. It was the kind of morning that might pass unnoticed in any other life. But today, Maya felt its weight. She walked over to her daughter and placed a small bowl of oatmeal in front of her, spoon already dipped and ready. Thank you, Mama, the girl said sweetly. Maya kissed her forehead and lingered longer than usual. How would you feel, she asked softly, if Mama got a different job? Her daughter looked up. Like, not at the diner? Maya nodded. The little girl shrugged. As long as you still come home and tuck me in. Maya smiled, heart squeezing. Always. She stood again, walked to the counter, and picked up the business card from where she had placed it the night before. Remington Ventures. The gold lettering was elegant but not flashy. Even the card was quiet. Intentional. Like the man who carried it. She had said she wanted to try. She meant it. But overnight, the old doubts had crept in like a slow fog, questions whispering at the edges of her mind. What if he changes his mind? What if this is all too good to be true? What if you mess it up, Maya? She slipped the card into her purse, kissed her daughter again, and headed out. The walk to the diner felt surreal. She wasn't going there to clock in or to carry a tray. She wasn't going to beg Miller for anything. In fact, she wasn't going for Miller at all. But as she turned the corner and saw the old sign, Miller's Diner, home of the bottomless coffee, her feet hesitated. Memories surged. The grease-stained uniforms, the way her back ached after double shifts, The nights she cried in the walk-in freezer so no one would hear. She almost turned back. Then she heard a voice behind her. "You came." Maya turned. Charles stood a few steps away, coffee in hand, a paper bag tucked under his arm. "I brought breakfast," he added. "The diner's closed today. Figured you might want to sit somewhere without being watched." She hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready." He didn't answer right away. Just held out the bag. "There's a bench in the park 2 blocks over," he said. "Shady, quiet. You don't have to decide anything today. Just sit with it." Maya took the bag. It was still warm. They walked in silence, and soon reached the park, really just a grassy square with a few oak trees and a rusting jungle gym. The bench he'd mentioned faced a small fountain that hadn't worked in years. The sound of cicadas hummed faintly in the background, and the breeze smelled faintly of honeysuckle. He sat beside her. She opened the bag. 2 sausage biscuits, a small jar of jam, and a napkin folded with care. She smiled faintly. "This is better than anything Miller ever served." Charles laughed. Low bar. They ate in silence for a while, broken only by the occasional bird call and the sound of children playing in the distance. Finally, Charles spoke. "You don't owe me anything." Maya turned her head slightly. "You don't have to say yes to make up for what your mother did. Or because you think I expect something. You say yes if it's yours. Not mine." She looked down. "What if I can't do it?" "What's it?" "Lead. Build. Make something new. I've been surviving for so long, I don't know how to dream anymore." Charles leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Then let's start smaller. Don't call it a dream. Call it a place where you don't get slapped for spilling coffee. Where you're not spoken to like you're worthless. Where someone like your daughter could grow up and believe she belongs anywhere she wants to be." Maya blinked. That image, it cracked something open in her. "Her name's Ava," she said softly. Charles smiled. "Pretty name. She's already smarter than me," Maya added. "Good. Then you're doing something right." Maya laughed, quiet and short, but real. Her eyes brimmed again. "I've spent my whole life just making do. I've never been asked what I wanted something to look like. No one's ever trusted me with anything bigger than a double shift." "I'm not giving you power," Charles said gently. "I'm offering you a seat at the table you've already earned." She fell silent. The park suddenly felt like the center of the universe, just a quiet corner where her world could change again. After a long moment, she asked, "What happens next?" "We draft a plan," he replied. "We file new permits. We design the space with people in mind, not just profits. And you," he paused, "you'll be part of all of it. From paint color to hiring." "That sounds terrifying," Maya admitted. He nodded. "Most good things are." She exhaled, slow and steady, then reached into her purse, pulled out the envelope he had given her the day before, and placed it on the bench between them. "I haven't even opened it," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. She slid it back into her purse. "I'm not saying yes yet," she said carefully, "but I'm not saying no either. That's all I need for today." They sat quietly again, the sun now higher, casting long shadows across the grass. Maya leaned back against the bench and let the wind brush her face. "I'll be scared," she said after a while. "I know," Charles replied, "but I think I'd be more scared to go back." He nodded. "That's how you know you're walking toward something better." The Remington family estate in Savannah wasn't the sort of place most people ever saw in person. Hidden behind wrought iron gates and towering oaks, the house sat on acres of manicured lawn, its white columns weathered with grace, not neglect. But Charles didn't visit much anymore. Too many memories soaked into the wood paneling and marble floors. Too much of his past, polished but hollow. Today, he stood in the guest house behind the main building, staring at the faded file he had pulled from an old safe. Incident report, 2001 Savannah fire. Stamped with the Remington Development Company's seal. It had taken years for him to even look at it again. He flipped through the pages slowly. The typed accounts were dry. Clinical pages of loss, reduced to fire codes and timestamps. But then he found it. Her name, Ruth Williams, emergency nurse, volunteer responder, fatality on scene. His hand trembled slightly. The paper smelled like old smoke. His throat tightened. He remembered the heat, the way it had closed in around him like a living thing. He had been 30 then, overworked and full of pride, refusing to evacuate until he had retrieved a presentation file from his office. It was a mistake he never forgave himself for. The hallway had collapsed behind him. The lights had flickered out. Smoke flooded the corridor, so thick he couldn't breathe, couldn't see. He had crawled on the floor, blindly. Panic had set in, the kind that makes a man realize how very alone he is. Until she came. He never saw her face, just the voice, hoarse but firm. "You're not dying here, baby. You got too much to do." And then hands on his shoulders, dragging him. Her body shielding his. The last thing he heard before blacking out was her coughing, choking, still telling him. Almost there. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later. She never made it out. That guilt had carved something permanent in him, not just survivor's guilt, but the knowledge that someone had seen worth in him when he was most worthless. He had spent the years after trying to live in a way that honored that moment, building his company with a heart for the forgotten, the unseen. But it had always felt incomplete. Until Maya. He closed the file gently and stepped outside. The Georgia sun hit him full in the chest, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel heavy. Back in town, Maya stood in front of the closed diner. The closed for renovation sign was taped to the window, and for once, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a breath drawn before speaking. She glanced at her reflection in the glass door. Her split lip had faded to a soft bruise. The scar wouldn't stay forever, but what it meant might. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. She turned as Charles's pickup pulled into the lot. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked as he stepped out. "No," she admitted, "but I'm showing up anyway. That's all you need to do today." They walked inside together. The place was darker than usual, stripped of its noise and judgment. Without customers, without Miller, it looked tired, but not hopeless. Charles handed her a rolled-up blueprint. "I want your input," he said. "Tell me what stays, what goes." "No." Maya opened it slowly. The new name stared back at her in elegant font. "Ruth's Table, a place for everyone." Her breath hitched. "You're naming it after her?" "I am," he said. "But this won't be a memorial. It'll be a beginning." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She never wanted to be famous. She just wanted to do good. Charles looked around the empty diner. "Then we're honoring her the right way." They walked the space together. Maya pointed to the old jukebox. "That goes," she said. "Hasn't worked since I got here." "The counter?" Charles asked. She ran her hand across its edge. "We can keep it, but let's sand it down. New stain. Make it feel like home, not a transaction." He nodded. They moved table to table, corner to corner. She told stories, funny ones, quiet ones. About the couple who came every Friday and only ordered pie. The trucker who always left extra tip when she looked tired. Even about the little girl who once spilled orange juice and started crying, only to have Maya give her a free scoop of whipped cream just to make her laugh. "These people matter," she said. "Even the ones who don't tip. They're part of it." Charles listened, not just nodded, listened. And then he said, "I want you to manage this place." Maya froze. "I told you," he continued, "this isn't charity. I'm not just slapping your mom's name on the wall. I want you to run it. Hire your team. Set the tone. Make it what it was always supposed to be." Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't have a degree. I've never managed anything bigger than a breakfast shift." "You've managed people, Maya. You've managed hope in a hopeless place. That's more than enough." She looked down at the blueprint again. Her mother's name staring back at her. And in that moment, it didn't feel like someone else's story. It felt like hers. She folded the blueprint, tucked it under her arm, and looked Charles in the eye. "If I do this, I'm doing it all the way." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." They left the diner together, locking the door behind them not to shut it down, but to prepare it for something new. And as they walked toward the truck, Maya said quietly, "Tell me more about that fire, about my mother." Charles exhaled. She was brave, not just in that moment. I think her whole life was brave. "No." Maya smiled. "Sounds like someone I'd like to know." "You already do," he replied. And the two of them, tethered by the same flame, stepped into the light of a new future. The hammering started before the sun rose. Outside the now closed Miller's Diner, soon to be Ruth's Table, A small crew began pulling down the old rusted sign with more rust than letters, the one that had hung crooked for years like a shrug from the building itself. As the metal clanged against the sidewalk, Maya flinched from across the street, coffee in hand, Ava's tiny backpack over her shoulder. "Why are they breaking your diner, Mama?" Ava asked, peering up with sleepy eyes. Maya smiled softly. "They're not breaking it, baby. They're getting it ready to become something better." Ava nodded, satisfied with that answer as they waited for the daycare doors to open. But inside Maya, something wasn't sitting right. She had barely slept the night before. Her thoughts chased themselves in circles. The blueprint, the staff she might hire, the systems she didn't understand, the new title Charles kept repeating like it was already hers: manager, leader, partner. And worse, she'd received 3 messages from people she knew in town. Only one had been kind. The other 2 were dripping with the bitterness she feared would only grow louder. "Heard you're taking over the diner. I guess being pitiful finally pays off. Miller says you manipulated that investor guy. Real classy, Maya." People in small towns didn't forget. They didn't forgive easily either, especially when someone like her got offered something they weren't offered themselves. Maya dropped Ava off, kissed her forehead, and told her to listen to Miss Clara, the daycare teacher who always wore too much perfume and gave the best hugs. Then she made her way to the construction site, where Charles was already speaking to the project manager about new flooring. He glanced up when she arrived and immediately noticed the tension in her eyes. "Rough morning?" She handed him the coffee. "Medium roast. 1 sugar, no cream." He raised an eyebrow. "You remembered? You've ordered it 21 times, she said. "And tipped $20 for 12. He grinned. "Good memory." "Bad mood," she replied. "Want to talk?" She shook her head but didn't walk away. Charles nodded toward the inside of the diner. "Walk with me." They stepped carefully through the stripped-down interior, the booths removed, the counters exposed. Sawdust hung in the air like a dry fog. "I got a message this morning," Maya finally said. 2, actually. "People think I manipulated you, that I don't deserve this." Charles didn't answer right away. He ran his hand along the bare wall. "They're right about one thing," he said. "You don't deserve this." Her face froze. The words sliced through the already fragile confidence she'd spent days piecing together. But then he turned to face her. "You deserve more." She blinked. "They're used to seeing you one way. Quiet, tired, bent over backward for them. Now you're standing. And that's uncomfortable. It reminds them what they've accepted for themselves." She folded her arms. "It's hard not to believe them. I've been at the bottom so long I forgot what standing tall even feels like." "Then let me help you remember," he said. "And when you hear those voices, I want you to ask yourself something. Are they building anything? Or are they just afraid of what you'll build without them?" Maya stared at the exposed beams above them, the old ceiling panels removed, the insulation visible like raw nerves. She took a deep breath. "We're going to have to rebuild more than just the walls, Charles." "No, I know." They continued walking through the space, noting places where Maya imagined changes. She pointed to where she wanted a bulletin board for community news, a wall for customer artwork, a corner where teenagers could read or do homework. "I want it to feel like home for people who never felt welcome before." Charles smiled. "You're already thinking like a leader." But even as they planned, tension was brewing. That afternoon, the local news site ran a headline: "Outsider buys diner. Fires owner local woman named manager amid controversy." The article was filled with half-truths and vague accusations, quoting Miller, who claimed he'd been tricked into signing the contract. He painted himself as a victim, ousted by an emotional story and outside money. Commenters lined up to choose sides. Some defended Maya. Others echoed Miller's bitterness, calling her undeserving, unqualified. Maya saw it on her phone during her break and felt her stomach twist into knots. She walked into the half-gutted dining area where Charles stood, phone in hand, already having read it. He looked up. "You okay?" She didn't answer. Instead, she held out the phone with the article. He glanced again, already calm. "I figured it was coming. Miller's making me look like some manipulative con woman." "He's losing control," Charles said. "That's what men like him do when the ground shifts." "Oh, I don't want to be the villain in someone else's story." Charles folded his arms. You don't get to choose the stories they tell. You only get to choose the story you live. She looked down, her voice low. People already think the worst. Then prove them wrong. Not with your words, with your work. She nodded slowly, jaw tightening. Let's get back to work, she said. And so they did. That evening, Maya returned home to find an envelope under her door. No name on it. Inside was a single piece of paper. You don't belong here, you never did. No signature, no return address. Just fear, folded and slipped under her piece like a poison note. She sat on the couch, fingers trembling, heart pounding. But then, across the room, Ava giggled in her sleep, her tiny body curled in the second-hand bed they'd shared for years. And Maya thought of her mother. She thought of Charles. And then she looked at the note again and calmly tore it in two. She picked up her pen and wrote on a fresh piece of paper. Ruth's table staff meeting, Saturday at 10 a.m. Be early, be bold. She posted it on the new bulletin board they'd installed just that morning inside the diner. The voices of fear were getting louder, but so was hers. The diner smelled like fresh paint and sawdust, with a hint of lemon from the cleaner Maya had used that morning. The Ruth's table sign had not been installed yet, but the promise of it floated in the air like perfume before a first date. Maya stood near the front counter, nervously arranging the coffee station for the third time. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about control, finding little things she could manage while everything around her kept shifting like sand beneath her feet. She glanced at the wall clock. 9:52 a.m. The staff meeting was set for 10. She didn't expect a full crowd. After all, who would willingly return to the place they once fled from or were mistreated in? Who would believe a diner could become anything other than what it had always been: greasy, bitter, and indifferent? Still, she hoped, by 9:57, the first person walked in. It was Clara, a dishwasher who had once been fired for missing 2 shifts when her son got sick. She nodded to Maya, holding a small notebook in her hand like it was a weapon or a shield. Then came Julian, the tall, quiet busboy, who had never said much, but had once slipped Maya a cough drop when her throat was raw, and Miller made her work the register anyway. By 10:03, 6 people had gathered. Some Maya recognized. Others she'd only seen in passing, folks who had drifted through Miller's employment door like ghosts with name tags. Charles stepped in at 10:05, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down. No speech, no clipboard, just presence. He stood in the back, letting the space belong to Maya. She cleared her throat and stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," she began, voice more confident than she felt. "I know it's Saturday. I know you've probably got other places you'd rather be." Nervous chuckles, shifting feet. "But this place, this diner, it's going to be different now. Not just new chairs and better coffee. Different from the inside out." Clara raised her hand. "Does that mean Miller's really out?" Maya nodded. "He sold the business. Charles is the new owner, and I've been asked to manage." The room went still. A few exchanged looks. One woman folded her arms, skeptical. Julian spoke. "What makes this time different?" Maya took a breath. "Because we're building this together. From scratch. No yelling. No shame. Real schedules. Real breaks. Fair pay. And your voices will matter." Someone near the back muttered, "We've heard that before." Maya didn't flinch. "I know. That's why I'm not asking for trust today. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." A beat. Then Clara said softly, "And if we speak up, we won't get fired?" Maya looked her in the eye. "Not for being human." Charles finally stepped forward. "We're not hiring employees," he added. "We're forming a team. A community. If that's something you want to be part of, we'd love to have you." Maya turned back to the group. "Orientation is Monday. You don't have to commit today, but if you want a fresh start, there's a seat at the table." The group lingered a while longer. Some asked questions about hours, uniforms, tips. Maya answered each one with the best balance of confidence and honesty she could muster. She didn't pretend to have all the answers, but she made one thing clear: this would not be Miller's diner too. As the staff slowly filed out, Maya walked toward Charles, who leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You did good," he said. "I fumbled half of that. You spoke with your heart. That's what matters most." She nodded, though anxiety still tugged at her gut. Half of them won't come back Monday. Maybe not, Charles said, but the right ones will. She opened her mouth to respond when the front door slammed open. Miller. His face was red, chest heaving. He looked older than he had just a week ago, like bitterness had aged him overnight. "You think you can just erase me?" he barked. Charles stepped forward, protective but calm. "You're trespassing." Miller jabbed a finger toward Maya. "She's a waitress." "A waitress, Charles, not a manager." "She barely passed high school." Maya didn't move. "Do you know what people are saying?" Miller shouted. "They're laughing at you, calling you soft, saying you let some sob story twist your business." Charles's face remained unreadable. "Are you done?" "No," Miller snapped. "You can put her name on the wall, but she'll crash this place in 6 months. And when she does, I'll be here to buy it back for pennies." Maya stepped forward, voice quiet but unwavering. "You're wrong," Miller sneered. "Oh yeah? You think some sad little smile and a pity hire make you a leader?" "No," she said. "But showing up every day when the world tells you you're nothing that makes you something. Building a place where people matter that makes you dangerous to men like you." "Maigre." Miller laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think you're better than me now?" Maya tilted her head. "No. I think I stopped being afraid of you." The room was silent. Miller's face twitched. He looked at Charles, then Maya, then back again. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him so hard it rattled the glass. Maya exhaled, her knees weak. Charles placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You handled that better than I would have." "No. I wanted to scream," she admitted. "But you didn't. Only because my daughter's teacher says deep breaths solve almost everything." Charles laughed. "Then maybe you should be the one teaching me." Maya smiled faintly. "Let's just get through Monday." He nodded. "Then we build." Outside, as the sun began to dip below the tree line, Maya stared at the new locks on the diner door. Behind her, dust still hung in the air, and memories still clung to the walls. But the future? It was starting to look like hers. The morning air buzzed with the kind of tension that only comes from new beginnings. Maya stood in front of the mirror in her apartment's tiny bathroom, adjusting the collar of her blouse with slow, steady fingers. It wasn't new. It was the same sky blue shirt she wore to interviews years ago, the one her mother had sewn a little heart into behind the bottom hem.